I mean, we are all in this together, regardless of which industry we're out of, which, where we come from, public, private, B2B, B2C, any of those. This is such a key importance right now. And I think I like to talk about it a little bit in saying we're facing, I focus on CX. I think the contact center is a major part of customer experience because it's the face. When we think about it, those two letters are almost as confusing as AI. CX and AI each are so confusing because they can have so many different definitions to all of us from that perspective. So next up, we've got a great panel. I'm going to ask Joe to go ahead and come up, and she can introduce the panelists as they come. So help me welcome the team.
Thank you so much, Sean. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Joe. I spent 8 years of my career working in a function where even the best strategy breaks, HR. And capacity planning is no exception, and I am so pleased to have Karen and Justin to have us join us to talk about and share their industry expertise on why capacity plans fail in the real world and what do leaders do about it. Welcome. Hi, Karen.
Hello.
Hi, Justin.
Hello.
All right, so for those of you who may not know yet what you do, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what draw you into this discussion.
Okay, so my name's Karen Elliott, and I'm one of the co-founders of a solution called Scenario, which does capacity planning online. And so what drew me into this is I was a consultant for years. I worked to optimize contact centers. I'm from IBM. We did a lot of services, and I found that everyone is capacity planning using Excel spreadsheets, and I'm sure a lot of you know different. And so, after seeing how much time and energy and laborious work went into doing this, we thought there could be a better solution. And so we used our countless years of consulting experience to build a SaaS solution for planning that can plug and play into any workforce management platform.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Karen, thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
And Justin.
Yeah, Justin Hurdle. I'm the Director of Workforce Management and Operational Performance at Bill Gosling Outsourcing. I use that tool. Not the only reason I'm here, though. Capacity planning is certainly near and dear to me, and I think a lot of what I've heard spoken about today starts at capacity planning if you want to do it really well.
Perfect.
Sorry about the shine.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Justin. So just to give you a little bit of context, Karen is the founder of Scenario, and I believe, Justin, you will be speaking from the user experience of utilizing this tool. Perfect. So in your experience, and Karen, maybe you could share some of your lived experience, what is the most common reason a capacity plan that looks solid on paper but falls apart once it hits real operations?
Well, and I think there's many reasons, but I think one of the key reasons is just the length of time it takes to build a plan. And again, it depends on the complexity of the organization, obviously. The more agents, the more service channels, the complexity grows as you grow as an organization. But trying to do that manually in Excel, just when you talk about, formulas and algorithms and that, and not knowing if one breaks, again, usually planning is centered around perhaps even one or two people. They're really experienced with Erlang, they're senior in the company. If you lose them, you might be in big trouble. But again, you're working with these really, really complex spreadsheets. And when something happens, and I was listening to the last session, if a weather incident happens or something happens, you're forced to react to it rather than proactively plan for that. I know they talked a lot about proactiveness and planning, and extremely, extremely important. But when you're using Excel models, it is almost impossible to be proactive because of the length of time it takes to revise or plan using manual methods. So again, that is one key point of failure. You lose the people that plan, they have the inner knowledge, another key point of failure. There's a lot of sometimes disconnect, and I don't know if many of you feel that in your organizations, between operations and leadership, right? Like leadership is looking for a certain thing when it comes to budget or margins and that, and operational is trying to plan the best plan. And then if it doesn't, it goes to scheduling if it doesn't fit into proper schedule, and then there's finger pointing if something goes wrong. There's a lot of points of breakdown rather than treating it as as a collaborative team, like you're a team trying to get this right? So everyone's trying to say the blame goes on someone else. So again, we find that as a key point of failure as well. But again, overall, I would say just the ability to be, and maybe Justin can speak from a practical operational perspective, but be proactive in planning, so you can, anticipate what might happen, be able to plan for it, so when it does happen, you're not scrambling, trying to spend hours or days trying to, understand how to respond,
Right.
because it's too late at that point.
Yeah, that's an excellent insight. And Justin, are there any stories that you can probably share with us of a real situation where planning tension surfaced between operations and finance, and what happened then?
Yeah, so there's several. So I'll just kind of talk about a recent scenario where the CFO is actually the person that's doing the planning. And hey, shout out to everybody in finance, by the way. Great work, great math. And what happens is the trust factor breaks down when one of those groups is trying to take the other one through an extremely complex spreadsheet. How are you calculating FTE? Well, how are you calculating FTE? Well, I like my calculation better. Both calculations are correct, right? So you're answering different problems. You're not arguing with each other. You're on the same team. You're just both solving for very different things. So I think one of those things needs to back into the other, and you need to have a partnership between those two departments. And that's what we were able to do is instead of, here's our labor cost, act within it. I know you have a service level to hit, go hit it anyways. Instead of that being the conversation, what the conversation changes to is what experience are we funding? So hey, the CFO knows the budget, listen, right? But what are we funding with that? What service level can we get? 80-20 and 70-40 and 90-10 are all very different cost curves. And without connecting those two groups, you kind of have one eye closed when you're planning.
Wow, that's really great. And when you face, I guess I could build on that, when you face those challenges, and if you have been working with a CFO who probably have a different point of view on how to approach workforce management or capacity planning, how do you approach that?
So my story in particular was not with our actual CFO. It was with the partner CFO. And the approach is actually very, very important. You can't go into that pointing fingers, right? Again, let's go back to nobody is wrong in that situation. So you can't go into that saying you're wrong or you're wrong, right? But you have to have a very clear way, and Scenario is a tool that helped facilitate this, is a very clear way of showing your assumptions, of showing your inputs, of showing the why behind your numbers,
Yep.
Remove that ambiguity so that then, again, your funding experience.
That's amazing. And when you shifted to a more structured planning approach, what changed in your day-to-day work? What changed in your conversations, even with the leadership?
So much. So my time investment on capacity planning in a more structured way, and once I was able to begrudgingly let go of my Excel spreadsheets that I was wrapping myself in at night and I was very comfortable with, once they went away, I was able to have more conversations. So I'm able to run scenarios now at an incredible rate. If I have just a baseline plan for a year, I can return an entire year's plan with change in 30 minutes. So in a spreadsheet, and many of you would know, that's days and days of work, lots of looking at formulas, lots of, oops, I missed a comma, and going back and different sets of eyes, right? Maybe I have to get my manager and pull them into that situation. So now he has to come into it and he's involved with that process, where this way I have the output. It's very clear. These are the assumptions. This is what I used. So let's talk through it and have a different conversation, but more conversations as well.
We had someone once that had a spreadsheet that was padded by 15%, and no one knew for 2 years.
Wow.
And they were over capacity by 15% for 2 years because no one bothered to look at the formulas. Yeah.
That's amazing. So I guess let's talk about how Scenario is solving these issues. Like what are the values of, we know that this all take time. And so where does Scenario really come in?
It's
apply?
multiple areas, like Justin touched on just the time savings from an Excel spreadsheet perspective, because it's online, right? You click a button to add a scenario instead of building another Excel spreadsheet for days, right? So being able to do things on the fly just comes back to the whole reactiveness versus proactiveness of it. Because again, after consulting for years, we realized, and again, being the ones to build these spreadsheets for years, we were thinking there has to be a better way.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, someone's going to solve this. No one was solving it. And we're like, because it's complex. There's a lot of complexity that goes into planning. Some people think it's a very easy, this time's this equals that. There's a lot of things like non-productive time and the glide path for new agents, and there's a lot of factors that come into play. So really, in terms of getting to the end results, the whole goal was let's make this quicker and simpler and not have to rely on algorithms that could break easily and have everything built into the system so everyone, and this is another point, everyone's using the same process to build a plan. So especially large organizations that have multiple planners, everyone had their own way of doing things and their own, like you mentioned, there's 2 different formulas to build something. Everyone was slightly different. So being able to do it in a way that provides the consistency across every single plan and the operation. And again, being a business process outsourcer, you have all these clients, making sure that everything's done the same way and being collaborative. Like, again, you're not emailing a massive Excel spreadsheet out that might, corrupt file or having all these spreadsheets. Do you have the latest one? Wow. We don't know if this is the last version. You have one source of the truth. Everyone's planning the same way. Everyone's looking at the same report. It's accurate. So no one's messing with the formulas because they're all baked into the platform. So that was the ultimate goal, having a way to give that ability to be consistent, to be collaborative, and quick. You have to react quickly in situations, and doing it in Excel just doesn't work.
Awesome. Yeah. That's really great. If, I guess we still have time, so I wanted to talk about, sometimes when we do the planning, leaders tend to think, or at least myself, I tend to think, well, what are the things that are important for us to measure? So when we talk about scenario, it really gives you, I guess you can explain how you can help other leaders, not to spend so much time on what matters, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So
what matters to you? Because I'm curious.
Sure. So I look at the capacity plan foundationally, and almost like building a house. We've had a few analogies today, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about AI for a second here at one point. But I think a capacity plan that is, again, structured, shared amongst leaders that are all involved in very different things, can show you where AI can really help you. So an example of that is, I'm working with a BDM from our company now, Nino, you might have met him, is here today. And we're working with a prospect now that is in a 24/7 situation, but their cost per interaction in their shoulders is just outrageous. So there's not a lot of people calling, but there's almost no visibility when you're stuck in a spreadsheet to that. They know they want to be that company, but are they ready for it yet? And I think if you look at your capacity planning like you're building your customer experience house, and it's the foundation. Your forecast is the ground. It's going to shift. It's going to move. Things are going to happen. If you have a strong foundation there, though, you're still going to have a nice, safe place for you and your customers to be. And it's not going to start breaking. The bricks aren't going to start falling, and there's not going to be cracks in it. And so then you remove that ambiguity. You remove some of the back and forth, sort of infighting, as it were, that can happen in business. And now, instead of talking about what do we have to repair, what do we have to fix, let's react, you're talking about how can we remodel our home? Should we have an addition? What else can we do for our customers? What can AI do for them? How can we increase the value for them? And the frontline agents as well. If you're planned much, more robustly and you're able to move and change, like we were talking about, change at a quarterly level. I think a lot of workforce management people look at it almost at an interval level. Having a plan doesn't put a whole lot of pressure on the frontline operation. And working to remove that only helps your customer experience.
I do find because you mentioned AI, so I might as well bring it up too. I find with AI, a lot of organizations want it, don't really understand how they need it, or why they need it, or how they need it. They just know they want it, right? Mm-hmm. So everyone's AI is the buzzword. Everyone wants and needs AI, but then what's the effect on your operations, right? So I think it's also extremely important, and we focus a lot on this on the software just with modeling it, right? If you do implement an AI bot, what is the impact of that? Because you're making a certain investment, right? A financial investment in this. So you can assume that a certain percentage of your volume is going to be taken by the AI, like maybe 20% of your volume. You can make assumptions. You can do pessimistic, realistic, optimistic assumptions, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20%. So you can model that, and then based on a certain percentage of that volume being taken by AI, at the same time you can say, well, you know, your average handle time is going to go up. Your agents are going to be, your human agents are going to be stuck with more complex calls. They're going to spend more time on the phones answering the calls, right? So when you model that, you can decrease your volume, but at the same time you have to pull other levers, like do an increase in AHT and be able to model that side by side to say, okay, you know what, all this volume is being saved, but how many agents do I actually need? Because they're going to be handling more complex calls, they're going to be on the calls longer. You know, you have to change different variables to see whether the payoff and the ROI is worth it. So then when you look at your financial model side by side, you can say, well, if I'm investing, I don't know, $1 million in AI, am I going to have a payback in like 6 weeks, 6 years, and be able to understand whether the investment is even worth it to begin with once you understand what the impact is going to be for your business. So being able to quickly model, you know, those pessimistic versus optimistic scenarios and knowing that you're going to fall somewhere in between, you can determine how you want to move forward.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree. And that's amazing. If leaders in this room, I guess, walked away and changed one thing about how they approach planning next week, what should it be?
You're going to pass that over to me?
Yeah, I'm going to butt that over to you.
So I think I kind of touched on that a little bit, is just to make sure that, you know, you're using the right tools. Again, hey, I love Microsoft Excel. My undershirt has grid lines on it. But it's really good for certain things. It's not so good for a fast-changing environment, omni-channel planning. So I think what I would take away is make sure that you have the right people at the table when you're planning. So not just somebody from finance and not just somebody from workforce or operations. Have those people all come to the table and really have that understanding that they're all working towards the same thing. Some of them are solving different problems, and you need to wade through that to make sure that you're very clear on what you're doing. And of course, use a tool that will allow you to run scenarios and answer the questions intelligently without ambiguity. Removing, you know, getting into a large Excel spreadsheet discussion, it's full of pressure. I've been there. I think a lot of people in this room have probably been there. Try to remove that. Look at other tools that can do that for you, that can do it quickly, and that will allow you to have that foundation that doesn't have your CX house falling apart.
I think for me, and you said one thing, I'm trying to focus on one thing, and it's hard. You mentioned like it being a team sport. I view it as, right? Like, so instead of operating, and they mentioned in the last session, like silos are huge. Everyone operates in a silo, and you really have to be collaborative and be a team, because like there shouldn't be any finger pointing. Everyone should be working together to make sure that the plan comes to fruition, and there's so many moving pieces to that, right? Being able to work together with a single source of truth, I think, is really important, because there's so many differing opinions, inconsistent ways of doing that, I think, play a part. And the second thing, and I can't emphasize that enough, is the proactiveness of doing something. Being able to look ahead. I have a new product campaign coming. How is that going to affect my plan? What's the impact on my staff? Or I want to implement a new technology. I have a new CRM. It's going to cost us $1 million. When is the payback going to happen? So when you think of new technology investments, you can think, you know, what is the payoff for that new technology? Maybe my new hire learning curve is going to be reduced. Maybe my average handle time is going to go down, something like that. So you can model that easily and see when the investment's going to be paid off. So again, there's so many different scenarios that you could quickly model to determine what the impact is before it even happens.
Wow. Then
at least you'll get a better line of sight. And that just a story, but when the pandemic hit, right? Like usually people base their plans on historical models. Well,
Yeah.
what history do we have on pandemic, right? Like what's going to happen in a pandemic? Now we have data, so it'll be easy moving forward if another one happens. But at the point, it's guesswork, right? But when you start modeling, and when the government put a contact center together, there had to be a lot of assumptions made for that. How many people are going to be calling in for information? Oh, we can divert all this to an AI bot or whatever. But you know what? Everyone needed to talk to a human. Everyone needed to talk to someone, right? So again, all those anticipated plans just fell through the bottom because none of it was holding true. But again, then you'd have to react to that situation, right? Oh, this is happening. Well, let's build an Excel model, and like it's going to take us another 3 weeks. So
Right.
3 weeks is forever in a pandemic, right? We don't have that time. So being able to model things on the fly when emergencies happen or anything happens, that proactive capability, I think, is so important in order to have a proper plan in place.
I think so too. And I'm so curious to hear from our audience today if they have any questions. Anybody?
Your capacity planning challenges.
And
Thanks. Thank you. Hi, this is Alex from TD. So it's a very specific question, and it's more about, you mentioned a bit omni-channel. So when it comes, we've toyed with the idea of universal agent, having agents to support both chat and voice, and we've got some conflicting results there. So just wanting to know what your best practice is in that area and what you have learned.
By blending voice and chat,
Yeah.
we don't recommend it.
Okay, that's a straight answer.
Blending voice with a back office channel, with email, with back office, anything like that, we do usually recommend, having chat with, you can have chat concurrency, you can handle multiple chats at the same time, but blending voice and chat, we really don't recommend.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question on that. Why?
Sure.
Why?
So when someone is on the phone, do you want someone to be answering a chat at the same time? From a concurrency aspect, like if you want to blend people to answer multiple channels that need to be answered within seconds, it's not really a good idea. Like email can be more a deferrable channel in terms of our back office work. You don't have to, be there on the ball and answer in a certain number of seconds to meet your service level, right? You might have minutes, if not hours, if not days to get back to it, right? So being able to blend, a channel that requires immediate response with something that doesn't is usually the best way to go. But chat, you need to be pretty responsive. And usually people can handle more than one chat at the same time. And again, there's a lot of considerations in terms of language and everything, but
Right.
if you had 2 chats, you could answer at the same time. But really, chat and voice, very not recommended.
Right.
I think I would add to that we're again, we'll say the word again, right? Artificial intelligence, I think, can change a little bit of how that works. So I think some of the reluctance to have that mix is that those channels maybe have different call or different interaction types within them, and that can be confusing if they're coming at an agent very quick, and it can impact your front line. However, if AI sat in front of it and could accurately identify what the issues were coming in, then you could make sure that it went to the people that are very, very skilled at that particular thing, and it's not going to throw them off. Instead, they're going to get things that they're good at, and then you're going to get a win-win, right? You're going to improve that engagement, and you're also going to be using AI.
Great. Anybody else?
I'll add too that when it comes to multi-skilling and blending channels, really important. Like a lot of people think, well, we have to multi-skill everyone, but I think it's, and I know Scenario does this too, but be able to tell you how to optimize it, right? Because again, if you're paying multi-skilled agents more, if you're bilingual, do you really need 100% of your agents to be bilingual if maybe 20% of your calls comes from only one language? You don't really need that, right? So being able to determine what the exact number of multi-skilled or multi-bilingual agents is to meet your service levels, I think is really important as well. Because again, more
I
cost
agree.
effective, right?
Yes. More efficient.
Yeah, more
in
efficient,
a way.
cost effective.
That's correct. All right. Last call from the audience. Does anybody else have a question? No? Okay. Well, I guess we have to wrap it up early, but thank you so much for joining us today. It was very, very insightful. And if you have any questions, you can visit Scenario at their booth.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you guys so
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
Have a good day.
Thank you.